Let me share a story about a small village with you that perfectly illustrates how our minds often play tricks on us. Its villagers had to walk 5 miles every single day just to fetch fresh water from the nearest river. The journey was very exhausting, so they sent a representative to the king to beg for a shorter route. The king listened patiently and then declared that from this day forward, the 5-mile road would officially be renamed as the 3-mile road. The villagers were overjoyed because they thought their daily struggle had been cut nearly in half. Even as they continued to walk the same long path, they remained convinced that the journey was shorter simply because the name had changed. This story perfectly illustrates the difference between being smart and being wise, as the villagers were smart enough to understand numbers but they were not wise enough to understand reality. We live in a world that prizes high intelligence and cleverness above almost everything else, yet we often see highly successful and brilliant people making devastating mistakes. They might be masters of logic and experts in their fields, but they frequently fall into the trap of trying to rename the road instead of actually walking the distance. Wisdom is not about how much information you can store in your brain, but rather how accurately you can perceive the world as it actually exists. Many people spend their entire lives exhausted by a 5-mile walk while celebrating a 3-mile label, and today we are going to explore why this happens and how to avoid it. There is a common phenomenon where individuals with high IQ scores tend to fail because they use their mental power to justify their existing biases. Intelligence is often just a high-speed engine, but wisdom is the steering wheel that ensures the car is actually headed in the right direction. A smart person can use complex language and intricate arguments to prove why their bad habits are actually strategic choices or why their failures are someone else's fault. This is known as sophistry, which refers to the act of using clever but false arguments to deceive yourself or others into believing a lie. When you are smart but lack wisdom, you become a master of the label fallacy by changing the names of your problems instead of solving them. You might call your procrastination a deep research phase, or you might call your toxic behavior a form of radical honesty to avoid taking real responsibility. Wisdom requires the humility to admit that your clever explanations do not change the physical reality of the 5-mile walk you still have to complete. If you are smart but unwise, you will find yourself running in circles because your intellect is being used to protect your ego rather than to illuminate the truth. High intelligence without objective reality is simply a more sophisticated way of being wrong, and it often leads to a life of perpetual frustration despite great potential. True wisdom is not a gift you were born with, but rather a set of mental muscles that you must develop through 3 specific levels of engagement. The first level is the simple act of listening and reading, which provides you with the raw data and diverse perspectives needed to expand your horizon. For example, imagine a person who reads every available book on health and nutrition to understand the science of the human body. They have accumulated vast amounts of data, but this is merely the first pillar of information gathering which lacks the depth of true understanding. Merely consuming information is just another form of cleverness that does not lead to deep change unless you move to the second level of development. The second level is reflective thinking, where you take that information and run it through the filter of your own logic and lived experiences. Using the same health example, this person would now analyze how different foods actually affect their specific energy levels and long-term well-being. You must ask yourself if the things you believe are actually true, or if you are simply renaming your 5-mile roads to make yourself feel better. The third and most important level is the personal application of these truths, where you turn your abstract thoughts into concrete actions in the world. In our example, wisdom is finally achieved when the person actually changes their diet and maintains a disciplined lifestyle despite the daily temptations they face. A smart person knows the theory of how to live a good life, but a wise person actually does the difficult work of living it every day. This transition from knowing to doing is where the most brilliant people often stumble because they prefer the comfort of ideas over the friction of reality. Without this final pillar of action, all the intelligence in the world is just a library in a house that is currently on fire. One of the greatest tests of wisdom is how you handle the shifting opinions of the people around you in your personal and professional life. A smart person might react to praise with arrogance or react to criticism with intense anger, as they are often deeply attached to their self-image. Wisdom teaches us to look at both praise and criticism as passing processes rather than permanent results that define who we are as human beings. Imagine an artist who receives a scathing review of their work from a famous critic in a national newspaper. A smart artist might write a clever rebuttal to prove the critic wrong, but a wise artist will calmly examine the feedback to see if there is a grain of truth they can use to improve. They understand that their value is not determined by the critic's pen, but by the integrity of their own creative process. You should treat every piece of feedback like a data point, asking yourself if the criticism is objectively true or if it is just noise. If a critique is accurate, then you should use it to improve your path, but if it is false, you should let it pass like the wind. Wise people do not let their inner peace depend on the validation of others because they have built a solid foundation of self-awareness and logical clarity. By focusing on the truth of the situation instead of the emotion of the delivery, you can remain steady while everyone else is being tossed around by public opinion. This mental stability is the ultimate hallmark of a wise mind, as it allows you to stay focused on the actual road instead of the signs posted along the way. When you stop needing the world to tell you who you are, you gain the clarity to see the world as it truly is. If you find this distinction between intelligence and wisdom insightful, please like my video and subscribe to my channel to help others find this video. As we look at the challenges in our own lives, we must ask ourselves if we are acting like the villagers who thought a name change could fix a distance. Intelligence is a beautiful tool that can help you map out the world, but wisdom is the courage to keep walking even when the path is long and difficult. High IQ people fail when they forget that their thoughts are not reality, and that their cleverness cannot exempt them from the laws of cause and effect. You might be able to convince an entire room of people that you are right, but your persuasion will not change the actual outcome of a flawed strategy. True growth happens when you stop trying to be the smartest person in the room and start trying to be the most objective person in the room. This shift in perspective requires a profound level of honesty that most people are simply too afraid to practice in their daily lives. Start seeking wisdom by moving past the labels and focusing on the actual results of your choices and the quality of your character. Commit yourself to being the kind of person who values the truth more than being right, and who values growth more than looking smart to the crowd. Take the time to listen deeply, think critically about your own assumptions, and most importantly, act on the truths you discover. Wisdom is not found in the renaming of the road, but in the steady and honest steps you take upon it every single day of your life. It is a lifelong journey that requires patience, humility, and a relentless commitment to seeing things exactly as they are without any filters. Thank you for watching.